Hey everyone, this is Fabrizio and welcome back. I'm finally doing a new video. I know it's been a long time, at least 3 months or something like that, but I've been very busy. Also, I've been taking a sort of a break from YouTube. There's a squirrel running around on the tree. It's very distracting. As you can notice, I have a different scenery. I'm currently in my garden in Italy, as I was here in Italy for work up until recently, and now I'm enjoying some sort of holidays. But as I was saying before the squirrel interrupt me, that's what happens when you live in nature. But yeah, I was taking a break from YouTube basically, which has been quite nice. But at the same time, I always wanted to start doing videos again, because even though I know my channel is very small and its reach is very limited, I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making the videos. I really enjoyed the discussion with you guys, and whenever you leave some comments, it's something that I really like. I love like reaching out to the community. So anyways, this sort of video, not this sort of video, this video is a sort of video response to my good buddy Emperor Fox. What do I mean with a sort of video response? Well, recently he did a phenomenal list of his favorite RPGs, top 30 to be specific. I'm not ready to do that yet, because there are still some games that I want to check if some games might fit into the list, so it might come eventually. But as for my grand return to YouTube, I was thinking to do the closest thing to that, which it's going to be a list of my personal favorite RPG series. Close enough, I guess. So this is going to be my top 12 personal favorite RPG series. Let's start with number 12. Number 12, we have Golden Sun. I absolutely love the Golden Sun series. I remember the first time I played them, I started with the first one. As soon as I finished it, I started The Lost Age. As soon as I finished that, I started Dark Dawn. Like, I couldn't put it down. I absolutely love Golden Sun. It's a treasure from Nintendo, which unfortunately, for various reasons, has been forgotten. And I don't believe it's just because Camelot is bound to do Nintendo sports game for the rest of its existence. It's just a matter that probably Golden Sun is not very marketable for Nintendo. But in any case, that's the thing. Just thinking about it, it's just they should just do remakes or just reignite people's attention and love for Golden Sun. And I'm pretty sure there is a market for those games. Golden Sun has a really dedicated and loyal fan base. I'm sure of it. But these are very charming RPGs, wonderful adventures, great stories, amazing music, and they look gorgeous considering that it's on the Game Boy Advance for the most part. But where Golden Sun truly shines to me, it's the gameplay. Both in battle, like the combat system, it's fantastic. It's your traditional turn-based RPG, peppered up with the whole Jin system, and again, it looks amazing on the Game Boy Advance. I cannot stress enough what kind of technical achievement that game is for a Game Boy, basically. But then, it's fantastic to... The gameplay outside of battle is also great. All the ways you can find to use the various powers you unlock progressively as you advance through the story. It's just so much fun. I don't know, you can push boulders to free a road, and you can, I don't know, grow plants, make the sky rain, merge into shadows. There are so many different powers and so many different things you can do, and it's so much fun. And personally, my favorite, it's The Lost Age, which it's kind of the same thing as the first one, just a different party and some slightly different powers, but the idea is the same. In fact, rather than a sequel, The Lost Age is a continuation of the original Golden Sun. And since, as you know, the series was envisioned as one game by its creators, but then one game for the N64, but then it was moved to Game Boy Advance and split into two parts. So That's why we have two games. And then we have Dark Dawn, which it's a good game on the DS. I really enjoyed it. It's a good Golden Sun game. It has everything that made me fall in love with the original two games. The only problem is that game ends on a cliffhanger. So we really need a proper conclusion to the series. And I don't know what Nintendo is waiting for, but who knows? Maybe someday Golden Sun will be revived. But at the moment, I don't see it happening, which is very sad. But at least we have three fantastic games to keep us warm, let's say like that. So at number 12, we're starting hot with Golden Sun. Number 11, we have an interesting one, and that is Parasite Eve. To me, this is fully into the JRPG or RPG category. It simply happens that it's a RPG survival horror hybrid, which is part of the genius of this series. I absolutely love it. I might even go as far as saying that it might be my favorite series from Square, because the first two games were developed when Square was still Squaresoft, not Square Enix yet. And obviously we know the first two games are the best. I don't hate the third birthday, quite the contrary actually. I like it. It's the weakest of the series, it just happens to be. But it has a lot of potential and interesting ideas. The problem of the third birthday is that, first of all, it was made on the PSP, which it limited a lot what they could do technically, from a technical point of view. Say, of course, with an action game, it's always complicated to play on the PSP because of its faulty design by having only one stick. And secondly, I mean, for a PSP game, Third Birthday looks amazing, but just thinking what it could have been on the PS3, knowing that Square Enix are really good at cinematics and stuff like that, and to think that Parasite Eve, after all, was the cinematic RPG, it really screams as a missed opportunity. So, but what happened? I mean, why was it relegated to the PSP? Well, a couple of reasons. Obviously, this is Parasite Eve we're talking about. This is a rather niche series. It's not Final Fantasy or Kingdom Hearts, so it does not receive Square's full attention. And second, what really, I think, hurt the third birthday and its development and the final result is the fact that Parasite Eve is not an original IP by Square Enix. It's actually, it all started with a book of, I cannot remember the author's name now, it's a Japanese writer. And by the way, I highly recommend the book. It's really, really good. There's also a movie based on the book, which is surprisingly decent. I was expecting the worst, to be honest. But that movie, it's not bad. The book, it's where it's at, but the movie's good. And the games basically are sequels to the book, to the story of the book. In fact, for example, Ayabrea, it's an original character by Square Enix, had nothing to do with the book. But most likely, sometime after Parasite Eve 2, Square Enix, like the contract between Square Enix and the writer of Parasite Eve expired, so now they cannot use the Parasite Eve title, plot elements, and stuff like that. So of course they had to do whatever they can without renewing the contract, considering, as I said, Parasite Eve is a niche franchise. And as I said, I believe they did a good job considering the limitations, but of course the product is not as good as the first two. I personally, my favorite is 2, which might surprise a lot of fans, since 1, overall, it's the better experience, but I think 2, it's more nostalgia because that's how I discovered Parasite Eve, and I played it earlier, and I loved it in every moment of it. I loved the gameplay, and as I said, like, the idea of having a JRPG survival horror hybrid, which were and still are in a way my favorite genre, was mind-blowing. Like, I never experienced anything like that. To me, at first these two genres were completely separated, But all of a sudden, Square showed that you can have a fantastic sort of Resident Evil RPG, which to me was a dream come true, basically. Of course, as everyone, I had a huge crush on Ayabrea, especially in the second one. There's that infamous shower scene. Of course, you don't see anything, but just the idea. That's what the beginning of just a teeny tiny touch of nudity in gaming. Considering where we are now, it's nostalgic and charming in a very innocent way. But back then, it was a big deal. And I just love Parasite Eve 2. I mean, the dry field, the desert town. I love it with that weird music. The mandatory underground laboratory, of course, but also the beginning in that skyscraper in Los Angeles. It's such a cool game. I love Parasite 2, but I love the first one. As I said, it's the better game, but I prefer the second one. So, Parasite Eve, absolutely my number 11 and a personal favorite from Square. At number 10, we have the Tales of series. This is a series that I still need to explore a lot, but what I've played so far, it definitely deserves to be into the top 10, not just the top 12. I played most of the portable games available in the West, and I started to scratch the surface of the main series. And so far it's been a great journey. My personal favorite is still Tales of the Abyss, primarily because of the fantastic story of Luke Fabre. But also the grand story, it's pretty interesting with the whole thing with the replicas. But as I say, it was truly because of the journey of Luke, and so far the best moment of the entire series is the final confrontation between Luke and Ash with the fantastic music. That was so epic. But other games, I mean, recently I played Tales of Zestiria. I really enjoyed it. I also played, Tales of Hearts R on the Vita, which was great. I played Tales of Fantasia. I didn't like that very much. Tales of Eternia, I didn't finish it, but I played most of it and it was okay. I played about 20-something hours of Tales of Berseria, and that was fantastic. One interesting thing is, to me, the Tales series gets better with age. I mean, the more modern the games are, the better. I mean, the old Tales games, especially the 2D ones, they didn't age well. That combat system, it's so slow and stiff that it really didn't work with me. I played Tales of Fantasia. I didn't like it very much. And it's not a bad game, it's just the combat system didn't click with me. But on the other hand, then I played, as I said, Tales of the Abyss, Tales of Hearts, which are fast and furious. And let's not even talk about Zestiria or Berseria. I mean, those are fantastic. That's how I like Tales. And I cannot wait to play more of those games. I mean, Tales of Symphonia, Tales of Xillia 1 and 2. I have Tales of Graces F. So many Tales games that I want and need to play. And of course, there's the recently announced release, I guess, actually, Tales of Arise, which looks very, very interesting. So it's a series that I'm still a bit frustrated, but I'm getting more and more experience with it, and I greatly enjoy it. In general, they never disappoint. That's the thing with me in a Tales game. I mean, they have traditionally great stories, unforgettable characters, amazing soundtracks, and fun combat systems. So what else do you need from an RPG series? In fact, as I said, since I said that Abyss is my favorite, it's because it has my favorite cast of characters so far. Not just because of Luke and his story, but also the side characters. Like Tyr, my favorite female character. You have Jade, one of the funniest characters that I've encountered recently, and so many others. I mean, great series, unforgettable stories, and that's why they're at Tales. It's at number 10. Number 9, we have Wild Arms. I absolutely love the Wild Arms series, even though I haven't played as much as I want. Uh, Mainly because now the games are like stupidly expensive, especially those that I need to play, 4 and 5. And 2 has not been released in Europe, unfortunately. But I still remember when I saw commercials for Wild Arms 1, my jaw just hit the floor because you have to understand how much I love Western movies. I love spaghetti Western movies. It's one of my favorite movie genres. And when I understood that we have a JRPG, which at the time were already my favorite games, set in a steampunk Western world, like I couldn't believe it. I never finished the first Wild Arms. I played a big chunk of it. In fact, I really want to replay it because I remember that I loved it, but I still remember when I saw that opening with that music and that anime style graphics, I fell in love with it immediately. I also played and absolutely love Wild Arms 3, and which is my personal favorite at the moment, and I still need to play, even though I own Wild Arms XF, which is a strategy game on the PSP, which is very interesting. But as I say, we never had 2 here in Europe, and 4 and 5 are available, but are super expensive. So I don't know if I ever even play them. I hope so. We'll see. But so far, just because of that setting, but also because the games are that good, naturally, Wild Arms is a solid number 9. I mean, I will never forget that opening for the first game with that music. Oh my goodness, it's so good. Unforgettable stuff. Number 8, we have the Grandia series. Here it's difficult because I played and finished the first 2 games. I never finished the third one, even though I played, I would say, 75% of it, but I never owned it. And plus, I think Grandia 3 was never released in Europe. But a friend of mine had like a hacked PS2 basically, so he could play North American or Japanese games. But I remember that I liked most of Grandia 3, but I don't remember much of it. And I never played Grandia Extreme again. I don't think it was ever released in Europe. However, the first 2 games, oh my god, they are good. I cannot wait, let's put it this way, I cannot wait to replay them on my Switch now that I own the HD collection from Limited Run. The first Grandia game, it's one of the most nostalgic, one of the most special and charming RPGs I ever played. It's such a special game. And to me, in a way, it's the closest thing so far of experiencing a Studio Ghibli sort of video game. I know now we have, of course, what's it called? Oh, I cannot remember the name now. I'm completely blanking on that title. Anyways, I know we have an RPG with the art from Studio Ghibli, but in terms of, but I never played it, so I don't know about it. So, in my case, so far, Grandia has given me such a strong Studio Ghibli feel to it, and especially at the time when I was also seeing those movies when they were new. So after I saw, say, Laputa, Castle in the Sky for the first time, that's basically Grandia the movie. It was incredible to see that movie and play that game. Beside the Studio Ghibli parenthesis, the thing is, I remember I played Grandia, I fell in love with the combat system, I absolutely adore the music, and I love the story. Even though it's as simple as it is, it's just a bunch of kids who wants to live great adventures, and they are completely caught on into this world-changing event, and they're part of it, and it's amazing. It's such a simple yet charming story because it's also told very well, and the main characters are so likable. I will always love Justin, Fina, and Sue. And what can we say about Grandia 2? I mean, there you go. I would say, while technically I believe Grandia 2 it's a better game, Grandia 1 will always be my favorites. A bit of nostalgia and the in a way the innocence of it. It's kind of very much in its strength compared to Grandia 2, which is very serious from the beginning in a way. But my goodness, Grandia 2, it's such an amazing game. I mean, it improved the combat system from the first one, which it's already excellent. It tells a fantastic story. It has unforgettable characters again. And what can we say about the music? I mean, the soundtrack of Grandia 2, potentially one of the best of its generation. And that's the thing, both games on PS1 and Dreamcast and PS2 are respectively, to me at least, some of the best of their respective generation. They are that good. And I remember that I enjoyed Grandia 3. I never finished it, and it wasn't as, I wouldn't say it wasn't special. At the time I really enjoyed the story, and the gameplay is fantastic, but I cannot remember much of it, so I cannot say about Grandia 2, but the first two, Grandia 3, but the first two were just spectacular games. Number 7, we have the Ys series. Absolutely a gem from Neon Falcom. I played most of it, not all of it, but most of it. And my personal favorite will always be Ys Origin, simply because it has by far the best story within the series, especially once it gets into the Fact brothers. I mean, between Hugo and Toll, I mean, those stories are amazing. But I mean, I've discovered Ys like most of us. I mean, no, actually, the thing is, I played Ys on the Super Nintendo completely random. I saw it, I didn't know what it was, I rented it for a couple of days and played Ys 3 for maybe a couple of hours. I died almost immediately, didn't go anywhere, so I wasn't having fun and I just dropped it. Also because it was very expensive to rent, because I also had to rent the adapter. But then, after a long time, I played Ys 1 and 2 on the Virtual Console, and that was a religious experience, basically. I fell in love with it immediately, and I tried to play every Ys game I can get my hands on it. Oath in Felghana and Origin are absolutely the best, I believe. They are just the peak of Ys in terms of gameplay. Especially, I'm a bit disappointed by where the series is going. I'm not a huge fan of gameplay and stories since Ys 7. I'm not saying they're bad, of course, they're really, really good, but just that to me the series used to be better, but just my opinion. Obviously, I will buy and play Ys 9 on Switch whenever I manage to get it. But as I said, to me, it's just that idea of I also love the run and bump gameplay of the old game. It's just that between Ark of Nepishtim, Oath in Felghana, and Origin, they reached that level of perfection as those platforming action RPGs, accompanied by those kick-ass soundtrack by JDK, and I just love the Ys series. I cannot wait to play Ys 9, even though I know that it's more and more into those mechanics and ideas that I don't love. So, for example, I don't like that Ys games now are long, since 7 was like 25 hours, 8 took me 40 hours, half of which I didn't care about, and I heard that 9 is even longer, so Ys doesn't need to be as long as Trails games, guys. Anyways, but it's an absolutely amazing series, one of my favorites, and it's a series that has some of my favorite music in gaming, and very iconic moments, and characters, and fantastic gameplay, and never stop adventuring, I guess. Number 6, we have the Shadow Hearts series, an absolute treasure from the PS2 days. I haven't played From the New World yet. which it's not Shadow Hearts 3. So it's not that important. That game is a spin-off. But I played and ridiculously enjoyed Shadow Hearts 1 and Covenant. I mean, these games were such a surprise in a way. I was always intrigued by them, but I didn't expect to like them as much as I did. Starting from the first one, it has a fantastic story. I love the Lovecraftian horror elements in the first game, which unfortunately were quite dropped in Covenant, which is one of the few one of the few things that the first game did better than Covenant. But of course, the first one introduced the fantastic Judgment Ring combat system, which is now one of my favorites of all time. But as I say, between the Lovecraftian horror elements in the story and a really nice cast of characters, especially some, not only Yuri and Alice, but also other members of the party are really memorable. And one of the most iconic to be final battles that I've experienced recently, Shadow Hearts is an absolutely amazing game. And as I say, like, the horror element was so right into my alley. I mean, that the abandoned orphanage, the cursed psychiatry asylum. I mean, so many great moments in that game. And what can we say about Covenant? That it's one of my favorite RPGs of all time. It perfected almost everything that Shadow Hearts did. And remember, that game did a lot of things right. But Covenant, I mean, it perfected the combat system to a T. It's super fun to play. It has a ridiculously amazing story focused primarily on alternative history, starting like during World War I with, say, like an entire plot to assassinate the Russian Tsar. And then you move to Japan, and it's so out there, but it's so amazing. It has an amazing and unforgettable cast of character. It really improved the graphics from the first one, which is not important, but I would say Shadow Hearts Covenant, it's a really good-looking PS2 game. And the soundtrack, it's really good. And as I say, like, it's a very unforgettable story. It has if anyone cares about it, it has one of the best, I would say, love story in gaming, which carries over from Shadow Hearts 1. So the story between Yuri and Alice, it's really, really well told. But in general, I would say these two games are absolute gems, and it's such a shame they didn't have the success they deserved when they were new, and that's why it's a very niche series, unfortunately. It would be so incredible to have remakes, at least like HD remakes of the first two games. Never gonna happen, unfortunately, but who knows. I will not hold my breath on Shadow Hearts remakes, but it would be one of the happiest days of my life if they'll do. But for now, the two Shadow Hearts games, and whenever I'll manage to play From the New World, I'm pretty sure I'm gonna like it. So for now, they're at number 6. At number 5, we have a sort of new entry, which is Shin Megami Tensei. I'm quite new to it, but in quite a short amount of time, I played some heavy hitters from this series. Most of the main Persona games, meaning Persona 3, 4, and I need to play 5, but I played Strikers, Q2, so a lot of Persona games, and I've experienced some Shin Megami Tensei, and it took me a long time, but it finally clicked with me, and now I'm absolutely in love with this series. So we're talking about both SMT and Persona, since to me Persona is under that umbrella. As I say, it took me a long time, because I knew about Persona at least since the PlayStation 2 days, of course, when Persona 3 and 4 were released and were huge deals. But again, was never able to get into it. I tried some other SMT games. Primarily, my first real attempt was with Devil Survivors 2, and why I love some aspects of that game I couldn't get into the game, certain mechanics of the gameplay, primarily the diffusion of demons. Now that I'm more experienced with the series, I know what the problem was. I, in a way, didn't want to accept the fact that I had to fuse demons. I just, in a way, I say, well, why can't I keep my original demons? I'm fine with that. No, you have to keep fusing them to have stronger ones, otherwise you're dead. An interesting thing with SMT is the fact that, for what I read on magazines and later from what I heard from YouTube, and also from what I experienced from Devil Survivors, was the fact that I constantly thought I should like this. There are so many things and topics and ideas that I would fall in love with it, but why there was this roadblock of the gameplay that prevented me from fully enjoying the only game that I played. Then I played Persona 4 Golden, and everything started to change. So for this, I have to say a big thanks to my good friend Leo the Funny Nerd, since he's the one who constantly reminded me to play Persona 4 Golden. And once I eventually did, I really enjoyed it and started to understand why this series is so good. And last year, I played Persona Q2, and that was the game changer. I mean, it's my favorite Persona game at the moment, and that's the moment that everything clicked. I was like, okay, I love this game. I want to keep playing, and I'm in for the long run with this. So, number 5, we have Shin Megami Tensei plus Persona. Number 4, we have Fire Emblem, the best strategy RPG series out there, in my opinion. I discovered it during the DS days with Shadow Dragon, even though, excuse me, I was never able to finish it because that game is brutally difficult. But I really like the concept. I really like the permadeath. I really like the stories, the characters, and all of and everything. But also the music. There's so many elements that I love about Fire Emblem. Then soon afterwards, I started to play as a little game called Awakening, which is my absolute favorite of the series. So I was talking about Awakening. I already knew that I liked Fire Emblem at the time, but Awakening was a true game changer in a way, because that is still my favorite of the series. It's the best strategy RPG I've ever played. There we go. And it was such a special game. And because of Awakening, I wanted to get more into the series, so I played Echoes, I played Three Houses, I bought the GBA once. I play a bit of Fire Emblem, the first one. I think it's called Blazing Blades, if I remember correctly. I played quite a bit of it, but kind of stopped because it was very difficult, and also the problem with Awakening is that good that kind of broke the series in a way. So it's hard for me to go back to anything before Awakening, because as I play older Fire Emblem games, I'm constantly thinking I want this game to be like Awakening gameplay-wise, because it perfected the series so much that there's no return to me, kind of. But I can't wait to see what Intelligent Systems will do next with the Fire Emblem series, considering that now it's very successful and it's a priority for Nintendo. Crazy to think that before Awakening it was on the verge of being cancelled. It's just insane how these things work. Now, top 3. At number 3, we have none other than Dragon Quest. I'm kind of surprised that it went as far as it did, but not really, because I absolutely love Dragon Quest. And thinking about it, I'll say, yeah, it deserves to be on the top 3. It's one of the most fundamental RPG series out there. But even without the historical significance, it's one of the most important series to me. I played most of the series, and not we're talking about the main series, because I haven't even started with the infinity amount of side games that are released constantly in Japan. So I'm just talking about Dragon Quest 1 through 11 basically. I played the majority of it. I haven't played 7 yet, even though I have the 3DS remake. I just need to find the time. But so far I've enjoyed every single Dragon Quest game. I love everything about them. The simplicity, the very traditional style, but also the way it has evolved without changing too much, especially from the 8th game. But with games like Dragon Quest 8 or 11, which are incredible. Though, to be honest, my personal favorite is still 5 because it has the best story, of course. You know me, I'm a story guy, so 5 will always take the cake. With 11, that's my second favorite. That game was simply phenomenal. But it's a series that it's curious that the fact that I discovered it through a manga rather than games, as I told in the previous video. I read the Great Adventure of Dai series, which now they are releasing a game based on it, and I think they're also thinking about redoing the anime. I'm not sure about it, but I'm a huge fan of that series. It's such a blast from the past to me. And as I said, that's how I discovered Dragon Quest. It wasn't by playing, I don't know, Dragon Warrior on the NES. That's something that I did much later. My first Dragon Quest game was 8 because it was the first release in Europe, of course. And yeah, it was quite a game, of course. I also have the 3DS remake. But yeah, it's a series that I will always love. I'm very excited to see what they're gonna do with Dragon Quest 12. I hope that it's not a PS5 exclusive, because that would be massively disappointed to me, since I'm not planning to buy a PS5. But we'll see. But as I said, like, it's in a way the most quintessential and the most traditional JRPG series, and that's why I love it so much. It's a sort of bastion of RPGs, of JRPG, I should say, and it is one of the most important and historical series out there, and I'll always love it. Number 2, we have my current favorite series, and that is, of course, The Legend of Heroes. It all started back in the PSP days when I played Trails in the Sky first chapter when it was new on that console, and it completely blew me away. It was primarily thanks to the Dustin Criss singing and praising that game to no end that it really picked my attention. I played it and nothing will ever be the same, basically. I played that game, enjoyed every second of it. I was shocked by its cliffhanger, and that was it. We didn't know whether the series was going to continue because, of course, as we know, second chapter had a very complicated translation history, and it took exceeding years to bring that game here to the West. So in the meanwhile, I wanted to play more Legend of Heroes games, and the only one available were the Gaga trilogy, still on the PSP, so I was able to buy them and enjoy them so much, even though they were not as deep, let's say, as Trails in the Sky. Well, with the exception of Tear of Vermilion was to me basically as good as Trails in the Sky, and I still believe that. Tear of Vermilion, which is Legend of Heroes 4, it's a phenomenal game. But you can really tell by now that those 3 games, while they're not as deep and maybe you can say good as the Kiseki series, they were really its blueprint. Like Trails is what it is because of the Gaga trilogy, so they have their role and they're really good actually. But again, afterwards I played second chapter, Trails in the Sky the third, which I might argue might be my favorite in a weird way, even though it's one that the fans usually ignore. But simply because it's a really important one. It's the game that properly started the world building, and that's when the story got big, basically, because first and second chapter are really compact in reality, because their main objective is to tell the story of Estelle and Joshua. And that's when the second chapter ends. But then we have the third, which is all focused on Kevin, which is my personal favorite character from the whole Legend of Heroes series. And as I said, there's so much world building, plenty of connections between Libero and Crossbow and Erebonia and Calvard, all the different characters, plenty of events. And once you play Trails of Cold Steel, because in my case I haven't played the Crossbow games yet, so I'm super excited for the upcoming Switch ports, about fucking time. Once I played Trails of Cold Steel, I could see a lot of connections and a lot of things that were started in Trails in the Sky the Third. And then of course we have the whole Cold Steel trilogy, which is just insane. It's so good. I just recently finished Trails of Cold Steel 4, and wow, that game was incredible. Just this whole Trails sub-series, I still call it Legend of Heroes, it's such an ambitious project, and we're not done yet. Of course, we have the upcoming Hachimari no Kiseki, Trails of Revere, which is the in-between between the Erebonia and the Calvard arc, and then we'll have Kuro no Kiseki eventually, the beginning of the Calvard arc, which I'm very excited about. I cannot wait to play those games. So yeah, I'm a massive fan of the Legend of Heroes series. As I said, it's my current favorite, but it's not my favorite of all time. That honor goes to my super obvious number one. I mean, if you know me, if you listen to a single video on my channel, you might know by now. But number one, of course, we have the Breath of Fire series. I am such a fan of this forgotten series. It started with Capcom wanting to capitalize on the increasing popularity of RPGs by the Super Nintendo days, and from the Breath of Fire 1 was released in the early 90s and was quite rough around the edges, but from that rough game they were able to polish it and create a diamond of a series. Already with the sequel, Breath of Fire 2, it's one of the best RPGs on the Super Nintendo in my opinion, even though I played it on the Game Boy Advance, but it's a Super Nintendo game. And of course, Breath of Fire 3, it's kind of the most important game I ever played, because it was, as a gamer, a life-changing game, because it's what really transformed me into a JRPG fanatic. A passion that I still have to this day because of Breath of Fire 3. And Breath of Fire 4 basically took everything that I love about Breath of Fire 3 and made it better. Breath of Fire 4, it's my favorite game of all time. It's something that will never change to me. Never say never, of course, but it holds such a special place in my heart that it would be very hard to dethrone Breath of Fire 3 from its place as my number one of all time. And I also love Dragon Quarter, Breath of Fire 5. I know it's different, but it's a really good action RPG. I mean, in my opinion. Excuse me. And we'll not speak about Breath of Fire 6 because that piece of shit killed the series and every shy and timid attempt to revive it. But those first 5 games are absolute treasures and my favorite RPG series of all time. I made an entire video on why it's my favorite, so I will not go into too much detail now because this video is long enough and I'm gonna cut it here. So my number one, obvious to the point of being predictable and anticlimactic, as I say, if you know me. But of course, Breath of Fire has to be my number one. So there you have it. These were my top 12 RPG series. What do you think? What are your favorite RPG series? Definitely let me know through video responses or comments. I will be very curious. So thank you so much for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon, and like always, take care.